People who live in air castles. Living in an air castle is about as profitable as owning a half interest in a rainbow. It is no more nourishing than a dinner of 12 courses, eaten in a dream. Air castles are built of golden monuments of time, and their only value is in the raw material, thus rendered valueless. The atmosphere of air castles is heavy and stupefying with the incense of vague hopes and phantom ideals. In them man lulls himself into dreaming inactivity with the songs of the mighty deeds he is going to do, the great influence he someday will have, the vast wealth that will be his sometime, somehow, somewhere, in the rosy, sunlit days of the future. The architectural error about air castles is that the owner builds them downward from their gilded turrets in the clouds instead of upwards from a solid, firm foundation of purpose and energy. This diet of mental lotus leaves is a mental narcotic, not a stimulant. Ambition, when wedded to tireless energy, is a great thing and good thing, but in itself it amounts to little. Man cannot raise himself to higher things by what he would like to accomplish, but only by what he endeavors to accomplish. To be of value, ambition must ever be made manifest in zeal, in determination, and in energy consecrated to an ideal. If it be thus reinforced, thus combined, the thin, airy castle melts into nothingness, and the individual stands on a new strong foundation of solid rock, whereon, day by day and stone by stone, he can rear a mighty material structure of life work to last through time and eternity. The air castle ever represents the work of an architect without a builder. It means the plans never put into execution. They tell us that man is the architect of his own fortunes. But if he be merely architect, he will make only an air castle of his life. He should be the architect and builder, too. Living in the future is living in an air castle. Tomorrow is the grave where the dreams of the dreamer, the toiler who toils not, are buried. The man who says he will lead a newer and better life tomorrow, who promises great things for the future, and yet does nothing in the present to make that future possible, is living in an air castle. In his arrogance, he is attempting to perform a miracle. He is seeking to turn water into wine, to have harvest without seed time, to have an end without a beginning. If we would make our lives worthy of us, grand and noble, solid and impregnable, we must forsake air castles of dreaming for strongholds of doing. Every man with an ideal has a right to live in the glow and inspiration of it, and to picture the joy of attainment, as the tiered traveler fills his mind with the thought of the brightness of home, to quicken his steps and to make the weary miles seem shorter. But the worker should never really worry about the future, think little of it except for inspiration, to determine his course, as mariners study the stars, to make his plans wisely, and to prepare for that future by making each separate day the best and truest that he can. Let us live up to the fullness of our possibilities each day. Man has only one day of life, today. He did live yesterday. He may live tomorrow, but he has only today. The secret of true living, mental, physical and moral, material and spiritual, may be expressed in 5 words. Live up to your portion. This is the magic formula that transforms air castles into fortresses. Men sometimes grow mellow and generous in the thoughts of what they would do if great wealth came to them. If I were a millionaire, they say, and they let the phrase melt sweetly in their mouths as though it were a caramel. I would subsidize genius. I would found a college. I would build a great hospital. I would erect model tenements. I would show the world what real charity is. Oh, it is all so easy, this vicarious benevolence, this spending of other people's fortunes. Few of us, according to the latest statistics, have 1 million, but we all have something, some part of it. Are we living up to our portion? Are we generous with what we have? The man who is selfish with $1,000 will not develop angelic wings of generosity when his million comes. If the generous spirit be a reality, with the individual instead of an empty boast, he will, every hour, find opportunity to make it manifest. The radiation of kindness need not be expressed money at all. It may be shown in a smile of human interest, a glow of sympathy, a word of fellowship with the sorrowing and the struggling, an instinctive outstretching of a helping hand to one in need. No man living is so poor that he cannot evidence his spirit of benevolence towards his fellow man. It may assume that rare and wonderfully beautiful phase of divine charity in realizing how often a motive is misrepresented in the act, how sin, sorrow, and suffering have been warped and disguised latent good in substituting a word of gentle tolerance for some cheap tinsel of shabby cynicism that pretends to be wit. If we are not rich enough to give cold, hard cash, let us at least be too rich to give cold, hard words. Let us leave our air castles of vague self-adulation for so wisely spending millions we have never seen and rise to the dignity of living up to the full portion of our possessions, no matter how slight they may be. Let us fill the world around us with love, brightness, sweetness, gentleness, helpfulness, courage, and sympathy, as if they were the only legal tender and we were Monte Cristos, with untold treasures of such gold ever at our call. Let us cease saying, if I were, and say ever, I am. Let us stop living in the subjunctive mood and begin to live in the indicative. The one great defense of humanity against the charge of unfulfilled duties is lack of time. The constant clamoring for time would be pathetic, were it not for the fact that most individuals throw away more of it than they use. Time is the only really valuable possession of man, for without it every power within him would cease to exist. Yet he recklessly squandered his great treasure as if it were valueless. The wealth of the whole world could not buy 1 second of time. Yet society assassins dare to say in public that they have been killing time. The time fallacy has put more people into air castles than all other causes combined. Life is only time. Eternity is only more time. Immortality is merely man's right to live through unending time. If I had a library card, I would read, is the weak plaint of some other tenant of an air castle. If a man does not read the 2 or 3 good books in his possession, or accessible to him, he would not read if he had a British museum brought to his bedside, and the British Army delegated to continual service in handing him books from the shelves. The time sacrificed to reading sensational newspapers might be consecrated to good reading if the individual were willing to merely live up to his portion of opportunity. The man who longs for some crisis in life wherein he may show mighty courage while he is expending no portion of the courage in bearing bravely the petty trials, sorrows, and disappointments of daily life, is living in an air castle. He is just a sparrow looking enviously at the mountain crags where the hardy eagles build their nests, and dreaming of being a great bird like that, perhaps even daring in a patronizing way to criticize her method of flight and to plume himself with the medals he could win for flying if he only would. It is this day-by-day heroism that vitalizes all of a man's power in an emergency, that gives him confidence that when need comes, he will and must be ready. The air castle typifies any delusion or folly that makes man forsake real living for an idle, vague existence. Living in air castles means that a man sees life in a wrong perspective. He permits his lower self to dominate his higher self. He who should tower as a mighty conqueror over the human weakness, sin, and folly that threaten to destroy his better nature, binds upon his own wrists the manacles of habit that hold him a slave. He loses the crown of his kingship because he sells his royal birthright for temporary ease and comfort and the showy things of the world, sacrificing so much that is best in him for mere wealth, success, position, or the plaudits of the world. He forsakes the throne of individuality for the air castle of delusion. The man who wraps himself in the Napoleonic cloak of his egotism, hypnotizing himself into believing that he is superior to all other men, that the opera glass of the universe are focused upon him and that he treads on the stage alone, had better wake up. He is living in an air castle. He who, like Narcissus, falls in love with his own reflection and thinks he has a monopoly of the great work of the world, whose conceit rises from him like the smoke from the magic bottle of the genie, and spreads till it shuts out and conceals the universe, is living in an air castle. The man who believes that all humanity is united in conspiracy against him, who feels that his life is the hardest in all the world, and lets the cares, sorrows, and trials that come to us all eclipse the glorious sun of his happiness, darkening his eyes to his privileges and his blessings, is living in an air castle. The woman who thinks the most beautiful creature in the world is seen in her mirror, and who exchanges her queenly heritage of noble living for the shams, jealousies, follies, frivolities, and pretenses of society, is living in an air castle. The man who makes wealth his god instead of his servant, who is determined to get rich at any cost, and who is willing to sacrifice honesty, honor, loyalty, character, family, everything he should hold dear, for the sake of a mere stack of money bags, is, despite his robes of ermine, only a rich pauper living in an air castle. The man of ultra-conservatism, the victim of false content, who has no plans, no ideals, no aspirations beyond the dull round of daily duties in which he moves like a goldfish in a globe, is often vain enough to boast of his lack of progressiveness, in cheap, shop-worn phrases from those whom he permits to do his thinking for him. He does not realize that faithfulness to duties, in its highest sense, means the constant aiming at the performance of higher duties, living up, so far as can be, to the maximum of one's possibilities, not resignedly plodding along at the minimum. A piece of machinery will do this, but real men ever seek to raise to higher uses. Such a man is living in an air castle. With patronizing contempt he scorns the man of earnest, thoughtful purpose, who sees his goal far before him, but is willing to pay any honest price to attain it, content to work day by day unceasingly, through storm and stress, and sunshine and shadow, with sublime confidence that nature is storing up every stroke of his effort, that, though times often seem dark, and progress but slight, results must come if he have but courage to fight bravely to the end. This man does not live in an air castle. He is but battling with destiny for the possession of his heritage, and is strengthened in character by his struggle, even though all that he desires may not be fully awarded him. The man who permits regret for past misdeeds or sorrow for lost opportunities to keep him from recreating a proud future from the new days committed to his care is losing much of the glory of living. He is repudiating the manna of new life given each new day merely because he misused the manna of years ago. He is doubly unwise because he has the wisdom of his past experience and does not profit by it, merely because of a technicality of useless, morbid regret. He is living in an air castle. The man who spends his time lamenting the fortune he once had, or the fame that has taken its winged flight into oblivion, frittering away his golden hours, erecting new monuments in the cemetery of his past achievements and his former greatness, making what he was ever plead apology for what he is, lives in an air castle. To the world and to the individual, a single egg of new hope and determination, with its wondrous potency of new life, is greater than 1,000 nests full of eggs of dead dreams or unrealized ambitions. Whatever keeps a man from living his best, truest, and highest life now, in the indicative present, if it be something that he himself places as an obstacle in his own path of progress and development, is to him an air castle. Some men live in the air castle of indolence, others in the air castle of dissipation, of pride, of avarice, of deception, of bigotry, of worry, of intemperance, of injustice, of intolerance, of procrastination, of lying, of selfishness, or of some other mental or moral characteristic that withdraws them from the real duties and privileges of living. Let us find out what is the air castle in which we individually spend most of our time, and we can then begin a recreation of ourselves, The bondage of the air castle must be fought nobly and untiringly. As man spends his hours and his days and his weeks in an air castle, he finds that the delicate gossamer-like strands and lines of the phantom structure gradually become less and less airy. They begin to grow firmer and firmer, strengthening with the years until at last solid walls hem him in. Then he is startled by the awful realization that habit and habitancy have transformed his air castle into a prison from which escape is difficult. And then he learns that the most deceptive and dangerous of all things is the air castle.